Here are 11 of the best non-fiction and self-improvement books that were released in 2024. Finding time to read can be a challenge, so I'll summarize each of these books in 1 minute or less to give you the best value for your time. First up, we have Meditations for Mortals by Oliver Burkeman, who also wrote the bestseller 4,000 Weeks. The gist of this book is about learning to embrace limitations and imperfections in life rather than dreaming of one day making it to your perfect life. There are 4 main pillars to doing so. The first is embracing your limitations. There's too much news to follow, too many books to read, and too many things on your to-do list. You can't face all of them, so imagine all these things as a river where you pick and choose what you want to focus on and then you let the rest of them just flow away. The second pillar is about taking imperfect action. Instead of taking your time to analyze the endless decisions you have to make choices quickly and act imperfectly. Most choices in life are reversible, so you can always go back and change your mind in the future. The third pillar is about letting go of perfection. Whenever you're doing something difficult, ask yourself this question: what would this look like if it were easy? Don't spook yourself into thinking you need a perfect result. And the last pillar is focusing on the present. Self-improvement usually always focuses on future you, but this book tells you that you need to focus on current you as well. Sometimes it's just okay to have a shit day and stay in bed the whole day, or maybe that's just me. And here's a fan favorite, Slow Productivity by Cal Newport, also the author of other favorites like Deep Work. The main premise of this book is that by doing less, you can still accomplish all your goals and not burn out at the same time. There are 3 main principles for slow productivity. The first is do fewer things. This was the single most life-changing principle for me, and I now use limiting missions and limiting daily tasks in my life every single day. For my annual missions, I only have like 2 main YouTube channels to work on, this book channel and another faceless one that I unfortunately have to keep private. I found it really difficult to have more than like 2 main missions, so I'd recommend capping it at this. And each day, instead of working on 6 different video ideas at a time, I focus on only one. Only when I finish one video do I move on to the next. The second principle is work at a natural pace. I also used to give myself very strict deadlines and I stressed myself on finishing on time. But now, to do the best work possible without burning out, I give myself as long of a time as I need without unnecessary stress, something I took away from Cal's tip of double your project timelines. And yes, it's important to obsess over quality, which is our third principle, but never strive for perfection. Give yourself enough time, but not unlimited time. I typically aim for about 70 to 80%, and that's good enough for me. The next book is a 20-hour read, I kid you not, and that's We Who Wrestle with God by Jordan B. Peterson, who also wrote books like 12 Rules for Life and Beyond Order. This book uses 7 different biblical stories and connects them to our modern day life, and I'm gonna give you the first 4 stories of the book because that's all the time that we have. The story of Adam and Eve. God gives them both great responsibility, but because of this, their egos got too big, they thought they knew better than God, and they disobeyed him by eating the forbidden fruit. The lesson to take away here is to keep your individual ego in check. The story of Cain and Abel. God favored Abel, but not Cain, because Cain kind of like half-assed his work. God told Cain to improve, but Cain took the easy and destructive way out instead, killing Abel. This is the equivalent of a victim mindset in modern day times. Extreme examples given in the book: school shootings and childhood abuse. The story of Noah's Ark. During Noah's time, Cain's wicked descendants started dominating humanity, so God sent a flood to wipe them out. The flood is a metaphor for many species having already been wiped out from the earth, like saber-toothed cats and giant ground sloths. Humans are just another species that can go extinct if we disobey God. The Tower of Babel, where humans tried to build a tower extending into the heavens to sort of usurp the position of God. A controversial present-day example from the book: God has defined for humans to either be male or female, but we are currently self-identifying as whatever we want to identify as. I don't quite agree with the reasoning in that book, but that's just what was written, so don't shoot the messenger. Next up, we have a much less heavy read on ethics and morality, and that's Right Thing Right Now by Ryan Holiday, the author of tons of Stoicism books like The Obstacle is the Way. In Stoicism, there are 4 cardinal virtues: courage, temperance, justice, and wisdom. Most of these virtues are what we can do for ourselves, and most of us actually get into Stoicism wanting to self-improve. But there is one truly selfless virtue, and that's justice, which is what Right Thing Right Now is all about. The essence of this book is this: love thy neighbor, do for them what you would like them to do for you, even when it costs you everything. First, we have Marcus Aurelius, the first Stoic Roman emperor. On the verge of being invaded after a plague wiped out the country's financial resources, instead of taxing the citizens, Marcus sold off all of his own belongings to get his army together. Inspired by Marcus, we have Harry Truman, who became the 33rd US president in a time when political bribery and corruption was the norm. But he kept his hands clean the whole time, saving his country $15 billion in the process, which he eventually gave away to war-torn nations. And then we have Mahatma Gandhi, born into a rich family in India, and he gave up his career, wealth, sex, and ultimately his life to help the untouchables, the less fortunate. Next, we have Surrounded by Liars by behavior expert Thomas Erickson, whose best-selling book is actually Surrounded by Idiots. My favorite part of this book wasn't like the conventional stuff like watch for inconsistencies in body language, but I loved the breakdown of how the different personality types lie. Thomas splits the personality types into 4 different colors: reds, yellows, greens, and blues. Reds are dominant, and they typically lie to achieve their goals or to maintain authority. For example, if your colleague is a red and she tells you that the promotion doesn't really matter to her, she might be lying to get you to let down your guard so you don't compete for it. Yellows are influentials, and they typically lie for acknowledgement. If your yellow friend is telling you about how wide their circle of friends are, they could be exaggerating the numbers. Greens are stable and they hate change, so they lie to prevent that. Greens just happen to be the most common personality type too. So if your partner is a green and you ask them to make big changes in their lives, like moving to a different city for better employment prospects, they'd probably freak out. Blues are conscientious and love perfection, so they're the personality type that's most afraid of mistakes. For smaller mistakes, chances are that try to cover it up. Essentially, knowing what each personality type values makes it easy to identify whether they're lying to you or not. Next up, I've got a couple of non-self-improvement books, starting with The Anxious Generation by social psychologist Jonathan Haidt. This book investigates why our Gen Z youths have become more anxious, more depressed, and more suicidal than any generation that came before. There are 2 main reasons for this. First, the decline of traditional in-person play in childhood, where children cooperate with each other, form friendships, learn social and emotional cues, and use their imaginations. On the other hand, virtual play takes away all of these opportunities. The second is the rise of smartphone usage. For example, late night phone usage is linked to sleep deprivation, which leads to increased anxiety and depression. Notifications cause attention fragmentation, preventing any ability to focus for long periods of time. Other effects also include addiction and social deprivation. Of course, the book also offers practical advice to address this crisis of the anxious generation, but that typically involves a lot of collective effort. For example, governments should enforce laws requiring online platforms to protect young users, including age restrictions, and there should also be more opportunities for free play in school curricula. Meanwhile, parents and caregivers can proactively limit screen time, encourage real-world interactions, and promote independence through unsupervised play. My next pick is Nexus by Yuval Noah Harari, who also wrote books like Sapiens and Homo Deus. Nexus talks about information networks and how they have evolved since humans have walked the earth, and also the risks that our present-day technology poses to us. In the Stone Age, stone tablets were actually being used. This evolved to printing presses with physical paper and books. And finally, now we have computers, the internet, and AI. And unlike these previous information technologies, which could distribute information but not modify this info without human intervention, AI can unfortunately now do so. I thought this chilling story best illustrates that. This is Go. It's a game that has been played for over 2,500 years in East Asia. Tens of millions of people have played it, and there are even entire schools of thought developed around it. Experts have long believed that computers would never beat humanity in Go, not at least in a long time. Yet, in 2016, when South Korean champion Lee Sedol played against AI AlphaGo, AI made a very strange move, now popularly known as Move 37, which at first seemed like a mistake but eventually proved to be the winning strategy. What this shows is that AI had easily uncovered ideas that hadn't occurred to the most brilliant Go players in 2.5 millennia. Essentially, in time, AI can easily surpass humanity. I also have a couple of business books for you, starting with $1 Million Weekend by Noah Kagan, who's also the founder of AppSumo.com. The core idea behind this book is to start before you're ready and to launch your first business in just 48 hours. There are 3 main steps to doing so. First, find a problem that people are having which you can solve. Let's say you don't have a lot of time on your hands to spend an hour per day walking your dog, but you don't know anyone who walks dogs. This could be your problem. The second step is coming up with a solution for that problem. Let's say your solution is creating a dog walking app to connect dog owners and dog walkers. Now, the third and most important step is to spend no money to quickly validate whether your idea is the real deal or not. So, what you should do now is call up 3 people who have dogs and ask them to pay you to walk their dogs. If none of them need any help because they love walking their own dogs, your idea is a bust. You go back to the drawing board and start again in step 1. But now you have additional intel. When talking to your 3 potential customers, you discover that their actual problem is finding dog sitters when they're traveling. You ask them for their next travel dates and you have them pay you for your dog sitting. If they do pay you, your idea is quickly validated and this becomes the idea that you eventually run with. The next business book is more story-based and it's about how Andrew Wilkinson went from making $6 an hour as a barista to having a net worth of over $1 billion. The absolute gem in this book is getting the perspective of a billionaire who realized that the fun was starting a nice small business, not getting to the $1 billion. Here's Andrew's story in a nutshell. At 18 years old, he was a barista, and by 27, he was a millionaire. He started plenty of different businesses during this time. One selling Shopify themes took off, and he sold it for $7 million. Then, because Andrew had much more capital, he started acquiring companies instead of starting them from scratch, including Dribbble and AeroPress. All his companies became a huge flywheel of income, and he became a billionaire in his 30s. Now he owns more than 30 different businesses, all of which generate hundreds of millions of dollars in revenue every single year. But here's what he had to say about it. Imagine that you love chopping wood in your backyard. You do it for fun. Then, one day, your neighbor asks you if you would like to chop him some wood for $20. Suddenly, the thing you love doing becomes a business. Before you know it, you're chopping wood for all your neighbors. You buy a truck and start selling door to door with your buddies. The business grows, and a decade later, you wake up. You're in a little glass office, no X, no fresh air, no friendly co-workers, just you sitting in your office doing some paperwork alone. That is what it feels like to build a business this big. Moving away from business books, we now have communication books written by Charles Duhigg, who also wrote The Power of Habit. I haven't read many communication books before, so this was very insightful for me. Typically, recognizing the type of conversation you're having with someone will dictate exactly what you need to say to them. Imagine having a crappy day at work. Then you come home and you vent to your partner. He or she listens to you and gives you solutions for your problems, but somehow you don't feel any better. Why? Charles says that there are 3 main types of conversations. First, we have decision-making conversations. This was the type of conversation your partner was having. They identified your problem, whether it's a toxic boss, lazy colleagues, or an overload of work, and they wanted to come up with solutions for you. However, you were having the second type of conversation, an emotional conversation. You wanted your partner to ask you about your feelings, you wanted them to share their own, and most of all, you wanted understanding and empathy. So, because both of you were having different types of conversations, you didn't feel heard. But when you properly recognize and match the type of conversation that you and your partner are having, what happens is magical. Your brain activity actually syncs up and you feel connected. The last type is a social conversation involving your social identity. This involves your history, your background, your family, your friendships, the causes you believe in, and so on. Regardless of which type of conversation you're having, remember to match and sync. And easily my favorite book of the year is Good Energy by Dr. Casey Baines. She wrote this book to encourage us to advocate for our own metabolic health instead of always over-relying on medical institutions. My favorite quote, "Every institution that impacts your health makes more money when you are sick and less when you are healthy." The bottom line, consider listening to the medical system if we have an acute issue like a life-threatening infection or broken bone. When it comes to the chronic conditions that plague our lives, we should question almost every institution regarding nutrition or chronic disease advice. When you have a chronic condition such as frequently occurring migraines, doctors would usually offer medication to deal with the pain, like paracetamol. This is treating the symptoms but not the underlying metabolic health issues. On the other hand, Dr. Meehan argues that medical leaders are silent on the things that actually make us sick, like diet and lifestyle. In this particular case, a simple migraine elimination diet would help, and this is simply just avoiding the foods that contain chemicals that can trigger your migraines. Yes, the underlying concept is very simple, but the book is packed with tons of info on everything you need in your metabolic life. If you want to read more books next year, check out this video on the screen where I give you my best tips and tricks. I'll put it up for you when it's done, and I'll see you in that one.